Welcome back, everybody. There is no health without mental health. You know, that is a phrase that I've heard the Minister of Health use in a previous conference. And we are going to be chatting about World Mental Health Day. This morning, my guest is Carleen Braffett, who is the Mental Health Planner of the Mental Health Unit, Ministry of Health. Good morning, Carleen.
Hi, morning, Gary.
Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Yes, always.
I swear if we didn't have these interviews, we wouldn't see each other at all.
I know, right? Good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So, World Mental Health Day will be celebrated on the 10th, which is tomorrow. How and why is Mental Health Day recognized globally and more so in Trinidad and Tobago?
Okay, great. So the World Federation for Mental Health, this is a global organization. They instituted World Mental Health Day, I think, all the way back in 1992. And since then, regions around the world have been doing their best to acknowledge World Mental Health Day, to observe it, but also the real goal is a collective advocacy. So all the regions around the world, we come together as an opportunity to increase awareness, to spread the word, to change our words into action. So by ensuring that we have the right services available, ensuring that people who are diagnosed with mental illness can access services. And ideally, the goal is recovery and that people can live productive lives. Mental health is a human right. And so we want to ensure that all that we do promotes that human right for all. So the theme for this year is Mental Health for All, Greater Investment, Greater Access. And in Trinidad and Tobago annually, we would have started this campaign, an annual campaign 2 years or 3 years ago, and we call it Paint the Town Green. And what it is we're trying to see this color that I have on here. Lime green is the color for, and you can see my pen, lime green is the color for mental health. And so what we want to encourage people to do, just like we do for Down syndrome and people wear funky socks, we want people to recognize that this color does represent or encourage some kind of conversation, public dialogue about mental health. So in Trinidad this year, this week actually, starting from Monday to tomorrow, is National Behavioral Health Week, where we encourage people to have conversations, to be educated, find out more, do some research about mental health, try to understand, what people are experiencing when they do live with a mental illness. We want to break that stigma, so try to prevent using words like, these people mad and they're crazy. That's a thing of the past. So we want people to be a little bit more proactive in how they understand and how they work to support patients who are living with mental illness.
And one of the common issues, one of the common mental health challenges, it's depression, and it's something that is still in this country and the Caribbean is still stigmatized to some degree, where people it's just brushed off in a kind of nonchalant way. How do we start bringing more awareness to this? The man on the street.
So firstly, I want to acknowledge that there's so many people who are willing to talk about this story. I think people tend to fear what they don't understand. So the more that people who themselves have lived experience and are able to kind of share and give us that inside information so we can humanize the experience, then people tend to develop a little bit more compassion. We want people to do some research. We're on social media all day. This is an opportunity where we can use social media for some good, to share your experience. Sharing. There are lots of people who are willing to share. And then we want to encourage people to read a little bit more, to ask questions, to have conversations. There are a lot of people that are suffering in silence. And sometimes us as human beings, we're not very attentive to the people around us. So that's one thing that we can do, the person on demand. If you notice that there's a significant change in someone's behavior, you notice that this person has withdrawn, no longer interested in things that they used to be interested in or would participate in. You're not hearing from them very often. Their social media posts seem to be a little bit dark recently. Ask, is everything all right? How are you doing? Now that we're in this pandemic, a lot of people are isolated, and isolation is one of the risk factors for persons who might be contemplating suicide or who might be living with depression. So now that we're physically distant, it's a good time to try and become a little bit more socially present with others. We may not be able to, touch and hug and kiss, but call someone. Right. Those are the little things that we can do.
Well, you highlighted some of the symptoms and some of the signs of depression and stuff, but are there any causes that one can pinpoint for depression?
Depression is caused by a range of things. One, we know for sure, is that persons who experience a lot of trauma in their lives. So, for example, a sudden change, that can be a trigger. persons who may be recently unemployed or retrenched. That's something we want to look out for. Persons who may experience abuse. Now that we're in this pandemic, we're seeing a lot of gender-based violence and domestic violence happening. Things like that, childhood abuse, childhood traumas, persons who would have lost a relative recently or may have been unexpected. Those are some triggers that can predispose someone to depression, and also largely depression is a genetic. There's also a genetic factor involved in that. So typically you might notice if your parents may have been living with depression, you may have some kind of predisposition to develop the illness as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you will. But there is a genetic element that's part of it, and but definitely traumatic experiences, sudden changes in your life, in the absence of proper support networks. So while many of us experience, sudden changes, not all of us may develop depression because we may have a proper support system, we have an avenue to express it, we may, have access to persons who can support us. But in the absence of those things, it's a little bit more difficult to cope, and it kind of really does predispose you to developing the illness.
So we've spoken about some of the signs and symptoms of it. We have spoken about some of the possible causes. But what are healthy ways in which people can deal with depression?
Okay, so depression is one of the most treatable mental illnesses, and I kind of want everyone to know that. Lots of people tend to feel ashamed to talk about it or to access help. It's treatable. Persons can live productive and healthy lives, even though they may have a diagnosis of depression. So while many persons think you have to go on medication, some people who have more chronic or more severe cases of depression would need support by medication, but not all persons who are diagnosed with depression may need medication. So one, definitely a proper social support network.
Right.
Being able to be encouraged by your family, by friends, by people who you trust, who can check in with you, look out for you. That's one of the things we want people to know. Secondly, a proper self-care regimen. While we have other persons, supporting us, it's really important that we also care for ourselves. So things like stress, illness, fatigue, these things can trigger some of these symptoms, and it can wear you down and deplete your resources to cope from day to day. So being able to replenish those resources, sometimes it's taking a break, stopping, taking time out. Those are the things, exercising, proper diets, meditation and mindfulness, these things also help. So what did I mention? Yeah, self-care regimen, a proper social support network, and definitely accessing help sooner than later. So, in our culture, we tend to wait until something happens, a big crisis happens before we access help. Exactly, we're reactive. So if you notice that you've been having symptoms, you can't sleep, you've been thinking about suicide, you find yourself not being able to get up to go to work daily, and you find that this has been happening for quite some time, 2 weeks or more, and you're just not feeling yourself, try to access some help. On the Ministry of Health website, we have a directory of mental health services that can show you where all the mental health clinics are available, and these are accessible to anyone in the public, free of charge. Call, ask a question, if you're not sure, just call if you're not sure, and they can guide you through the process of setting up an appointment. So these are some of the things.
And thank you so much. And quickly, Carleen, I understand the ministry has a webinar today.
Yes, we do at 10:30 a.m. I can share the information with you. This webinar, we're going to be talking about the vision for mental health in Trinidad and Tobago. I know you've probably been hearing the minister talking about decentralization. Right. And the call to action right now is greater investment, mental health for all, so that all persons can access mental health services where they are at. So what we're trying to do with mental health right now, we're trying to take it away from the focus of St. Anne's Hospital. That's a thing of the past. Mental health it should be accessible to everyone and all persons. So we want to bring all mental health services closer in the community. We want to make sure that our mental health HR is properly trained and competent and feel confident to be able to support people near their homes. So please join us for that webinar today. I can send the link. I don't know if you could share it. But yes, at 10:30 a.m. you can check out our Ministry of Health social media pages to get the information.
All right. Thank you so much, Carleen Braffett, Mental Health Planner of the Mental Health Unit, Ministry of Health. Check out their webinar at 10:30 a.m. today.